Hello, my name is Matthew Pfeiffer with mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel, I create videos and content about toxic, narcissistically abusive relationships and self-development and emotional intelligence. If you have a question that you would like for me to answer, make sure you send it to justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Just make sure you keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max, and you're also very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If it's too long, if it's too lengthy, unfortunately, I will not be able to get to it. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe notification and the bell notification so you're notified each and every time I upload a new video. I upload new videos on this channel 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And with all that being said, let's get into today's email. So today's email comes from a person who is on their way to getting married, and they are now starting to see some things that are concerning to them. The way they've described it, they've had a good relationship up until this point. But now they're starting to see some things. So let's get through this email. Let's help this person out, and hopefully this helps out some other people who are going through something similar as well. So this email reads, "Dear Matt, I have been watching your lives for a little bit and have found your content to be very helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And for those of you who don't know, I go live pretty much every day on TikTok. So make sure you guys not follow me there, make sure you guys join me there. You can follow me on other platforms, but I'm pretty active on TikTok. Should you decide to answer my question, I just ask that you change or omit my name. I always omit names. I always change names. If I can help it, I don't put names in there at all. But I always change names just for anyone who is curious about that. So even if you accidentally put it there, I always take it out or change it. I have been with my significant other since high school, just over 12 years now. We are getting married very soon, and I am starting to see some certain dynamics that I am finding a little off-putting. And so we want to point something out here, right? This person has been with this person since high school. So am I saying there's anything wrong with being high school sweethearts? No, right? But one of the downsides of being high school sweethearts is that we don't have a lot of other people or other dating situations to compare things to. I'm going to circle back to that. Let's put a bookmark there. I'm going to circle back to that here in a second. We did have a short break about 8 years ago, but we both kind of knew that we were going to get back together again. Since we finally set a wedding date, I have been under tremendous amount of stress, and it has been affecting our relationship. I've been managing and working through stress and anxiety surrounding our impending wedding with a therapist since January. I've been particularly struggling with this past month, and I think it's been apparent to my partner because he's been trying to help. That's a good thing. So one of the things that we want to point out is that it's always great that when your partner wants to assist, wants to be there, wants to help. But this person did put help in parentheses, right? So let's get into this a little bit deeper, and let's see if this really is actual genuine help. Let's see if this person is just going through the motions. So let's continue with this email. We had a conversation about some of the stuff that I've been going through, and that he wanted me to call him during sessions to tell my therapist what I should be focusing on in therapy. Fuck that. So therapy is for you if you're in individual therapy. You talk about whatever the fuck you and the therapist wants. If he has something that he wants to address with you, guess what that's called? Couples therapy. You're not calling him. He goes to therapy with you for a couples session, right? He's not the therapist, and he's also not the individual. He doesn't know what's inside here, and he doesn't know what's inside here. You do, right? So it's not for him to dictate. If he wants to participate, that's called couples therapy, right? So going back to what you mentioned in terms of help, this isn't helping. This is dictating. This is controlling, right? Whether this person is doing this intentionally or not, but the way that we know, right, whether or not this person is doing this intentionally is called boundaries. I'm going to get back to that here in a second. Let's continue with this email. He was also encouraging when I told him I was considering medication to help me manage my anxiety a little bit better. However, I feel like he's just kind of been meaner or more curt than usual lately, and I am trying to figure out if it's because he's just as stressed as I am about all of this, or if it's something else going on that I'm not seeing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about boundaries here, right? That's We have to understand that you hear myself here, other coaches here, other clinicians talking so much about boundaries, but the reason why boundaries are so important is because they act as a filter. So when you begin to set boundaries for yourself to and him as well, right? To deal with to manage your stress, to manage your time, to manage the things that you're focusing on, to manage your finances better, and that sort of thing. And one of the boundaries that we definitely need to set is what you're talking about in therapy, is that you'll be able to see whether or not this is due to the stress that both of you guys are under, or if this person is actually being controlling. And let's talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Most recently, he made a comment about my weight. This is also very concerning. Most recently, he made a comment about my weight, stating that I have gotten chunky recently. And I panicked and I went and tried on my dress to make sure that it still fits, and it did. When I told him that I felt hurt by his comment, he just said that he's just being truthful with me. So one of the things that a lot of times people will do is that they'll say that they're being brutally honest, but we don't have to be brutal to be honest. One of the things that's very concerning here is that this person is being very, very critical, right? Especially in situations where it really isn't even necessary. And this person is being, and one of the things I encourage for you to do is to be very familiar with the Four Horsemen of John Gottman, right? One of the things that is very apparent in pretty much all divorces, I would say 90% of divorces, is criticism, right? When people are highly critical and when people are very demeaning of one another, right? Those are some very telling signs that this is something that could be heading towards an unhealthy relationship and an unhealthy marriage, right? Let's continue with this email, then I'll get into that a little bit further. I never even asked for an opinion about this to begin with, so it's kind of shocking to me. I had mentioned therapy, couples therapy, and individual therapy in the past, but I respect his decision not to go because I recognize that you cannot force another person to go and change, and you can only really work on yourself. Yes, that's true. However, one of the things that we have to understand about relationships, especially in the position that you're in, where you are going to get married, is that we have to understand that everyone always focuses on the good times, right? One of the things that you said is that you guys have had some good times before. The true essence, the core essence of whether or not the relationship is good or not is not the good times, it's not the vacations, it's when times are rough. Can we communicate? Can we get through difficult times? Are we able to still respect each other during disagreements? Are we able to fight and disagree and still have a loving relationship and still be able to work through? And are we able to compromise? Are we able to meet in the middle? Are we able to still be friendly and still be cordial towards one another? And if we can't, do what is the plan when we can't find any sort of resolve or any sort of agreement? The problem with this person not willing to go to therapy. So you hear people who are on the back end of a marriage who say that they can't force that person to go to therapy. Well, how do we know if that person's willing to go to therapy? On the front end, right? If they're not willing to go to therapy now, what makes us think that this person is willing to go to therapy 10 years into the marriage when you have 3 kids, a mortgage payment, and a lot more stress than what this wedding is bringing, right? When we have kids and when this person, when you or they have a crush, I'm just throwing things out there, right? Throwing out common issues, right? When you have financial issues, when you have financial troubles, and this person is still not willing to go to therapy, and you can't find any resolution in your disagreement. What are you going to do then? And so going back to one of your questions in terms of, is this something that is really actually concerning, or is this something that you're just being overly sensitive because you're stressed out? The reality of it is that your stress and his stress is possibly illuminating a much bigger problem. Am I telling you that he's a narcissist? Am I telling you that not to marry him? I'm not saying any of those things. But what I am telling you is that you better try to resolve these issues before you walk the aisle, and make sure that you have rules of engagement of what we're going to do when we have issues. Are we going to therapy? Are we doing couples therapy? Can we resolve these issues? Can I feel comfortable being open and honest with this person without this person being critical, without this person being demeaning, without this person being demanding, calling me chunky? He might have some issues with your passive aggressiveness. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just throwing things out there, right? But we have to understand, everyone always focuses on the good, right? But the reality of your whether or not this is going to last, whether or not this is going to be healthy, is whether or not you can get through the disagreements and get through some of the downside. Let's get back into this email. I guess my question is, how can I discern whether or not there is something deeper that is wrong with the relationship versus whether or not I am taking things to heart that don't necessarily need to be taken to heart? So number one, and this is something that you should be working on with your therapist, we process all emotions. Everything that you take to heart, we process all of our emotions to know whether or not we should be taking them serious, because that's where we begin to structure our boundaries, right? But we also, one of the things that I tell people is we stop focusing in on the good times, like I mentioned before. That's where people get stuck. They think about the great sex, they think about when things are good. I want you to start thinking, and I want you to start to focus a little bit more on your disagreements, on when things are not so good, when he's calling you chunky, and I want you to think about the downside, because everyone always just assumes that those things are just going to go away when you get married, that marriage is going to fix that, and then everyone's going to live happily ever after, or once we have kids, that's going to fix that. Those things make the downside more, it exasperates it more, right? That it brings the stress, like you mentioned, the stress brings these dynamics out and illuminates them, right? Marriage, mortgage, kids puts pressure on a relationship. And that pressure tends to allow for these insecurities, unhealed traumas, everything that you've just mentioned in the relationship. It brings it to light. And without any sort of rules of engagement, without the two of you being able to communicate properly towards each other, without the two of you being able to and willing to go to therapy to work on these issues, right, then you might have a problem, right? A big time problem, right? Because once you're married, now you're stuck. Now you have a ring. Now you have kids. Now you have a mortgage. Now you have a lot of pressure to try to maintain this relationship when that other person may or may not be willing to work through it. So those are some things that I would be concerned about now. I'm telling you not to marry him, not telling you not to marry him, not telling you that he's a narcissist, not telling you any of those things. But I am telling you that if you're concerned now, we need to feel comfortable with these concerns before we walk the aisle. So thank you very much for writing in. Anyone else who has questions, make sure that you send it to justaskmatt@mattpipercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpipercoaching.com. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. With all that being said, thank you very much. I will see you in the next video.